Welcome to episode 182 of the Daniel Yoris podcast with today's guest, Patrick DiBello. Let's go. Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. Joined here today by Patrick DiBello. Patrick, thanks for being here, man. I appreciate your time, and thank you so much for being flexible on my scheduling time today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. This is exciting and no problem. The beauty of being an online fitness coach is we make our own hours, and when something comes up, we can shift things here and there. So this is all good. I'm happy to be here.
Not to be mistaken, though, to those listening, it's not all glorious. It also means that all hours of the day can be working hours, which is something that we also deal with.
Yeah, true story. There's no clock. You don't punch out. You don't leave it at work. You don't leave it at the office. It's nonstop. You're self-employed. You're continuously trying to grow a business, and you could be up till midnight, 1 a.m, 2 a.m, every day if you didn't have boundaries and didn't know how to shut off. So you're right. It's great to work for yourself, but it's also hard work, you know? Not that working for somebody isn't hard work as well. It's just different. You know, there's pros and cons to everything.
Yeah. I always say to people who are like, oh, it's nice to be able to, go to the gym at 2 p.m. in the afternoon. And I'm like, well, you know what? You know what you're doing when I'm at the gym at 2 p.m. in the afternoon? You're getting paid. I'm just working out. There's pros and cons to everything here.
Absolutely. And you get paid vacation, you get like insurance, and you don't have to come out of your pocket for that. So yeah, everybody says the same thing. Oh, you get to go to the gym at 1 o'clock when it's not busy. And I'm like, yeah, but that's because it's a downtime for me where I'm like, business is slow for one reason or another. So I'm sacrificing something for that, or something's being sacrificed for me.
Exactly. What was your introduction into the fitness industry? Did you always work in fitness as a trainer, or did you do something else before out of school? What was your starting point?
I originally, my education was called Motorcycle Mechanics Institute. So I went to a trade school right out of high school. Didn't last long. I ended up getting into sales because I just realized I didn't really want to be fixing motorcycles for the rest of my life. So I got into sales and marketing, and then I actually started an independent record label. Living in San Diego, I started a hip hop record label, and then I started to take my own health seriously, and it was changing my life, and I think a lot of people probably get into the industry because they've had some sort of moment in time in their life where they weren't in shape, they had bad eating habits, they weren't working out, and then you change your life and you're like, I want to help people do the same thing. So, as my record label kind of dissipated and my marketing job kind of slowed down, I was like, well, I have to do something. I like working for myself. I've, gone through the process. So I basically was like, it's time to get my personal training certification. And I did that. I trained some people for free in my parents' backyard at the time. And then I opened up my own gym locally in Syracuse, New York. And the rest is history. But it started with just being fascinated about what you can do when you actually take the time, energy, and apply it to yourself as applying it. The way I applied things to my sales job or my record label, like what if I apply, some of that energy to my fitness? And I realized, I can help other people do that. And I met a guy who's now a really good friend of mine, who's a pretty prominent player in the fitness industry, right when I first got into it. And he's a big calisthenics guy. I think he's like the warlock of calisthenics. His name's Kenneth Galarzo. And he was big into the human flag and handstands and front levers, all the cool calisthenics moves. Yeah. So that's what really hooked me. At one point I had a boxing personal trainer. I was taking boot camps and lifting weights with friends, and I started to be bored. But then I got this calisthenics bug, and I was like, wow, these guys are doing handstands. I bet you, even though I can't do one now, if I really, really practice, I could be like them too, and I could do a handstand. And that was the hook, and that's what really kept me in it. So I started teaching a lot of handstand classes and workshops at my gym locally, and partner acrobatic type stuff with strength training classes and all that. So that's kind of how I got into it and how I stayed into it. Because a lot of people get into it, but it's what keeps you in it? What's the hook, And the hook for me was skills, if you will. Like, lifting is a skill to an extent, but like it was the calisthenics skills, like going from nothing to something instead of just seeing the weight go up on the bar or on the dumbbells. It was like, I can't do this if my life depends on it in a handstand, but 6 months later, will I be able to hold myself for 3 seconds? And so that was my drive. That's what kept me.
That's so interesting. I mean, you adopted this idea of chasing a performance-based goal before you probably had like a conception of that, right? It's most people, you want to get into the gym to, feel better, to lose a little bit of weight, to, these things. And obviously that's fine and good. And then you see something like a handstand or something kind of flashy, let's say.
Yeah, definitely.
And sometimes that can seem like too far away. But as you're saying it, there's something that kind of clicked for me where it's like, because it's only using your body, I feel like it's somehow more relatable. Like if you walk into a gym and you're not a fitness person and you see someone deadlift 700 pounds, you'd be like, I can't even conceptualize what that's like. But I can conceptualize that I can't invert myself into a handstand and like walk on my hands because it's still your own body. And so anyone could do a deadlift with like a lesser amount of weight, and it's the same thing, just at a lesser amount of weight. But not anyone could just like do a handstand. You either can or you can't. It's not really, there's obviously progressions to it, but it's not really scalable. It's either yes or no, right? Everyone can do a deadlift just at different weights. So that's such an interesting psychology of sort of starting to really get into all this.
It's funny you say that. That's exactly what it was. And I love weightlifting now. I was probably a little bit more of a hater, if you will, when I first got into it, because to your point, I was like, anybody can deadlift. You can deadlift less weight. You can deadlift a kettlebell. You can deadlift a dumbbell if you flip it upside down, but not everybody can do a handstand, do a human flag, do a backflip. And I was like, the process that I would have to take myself through physically and mentally to go from absolutely nothing to something would completely transform my mentality and my physicality. And it did.
Did you have real hard or important to you at the time, like physique goals? Were you going through that type of transformation as well, or not so much?
I didn't, but it's funny you ask, because that was a product of how I trained and how I ate. So I was working out at actually a bodybuilding gym. Locally, there was a very successful bodybuilder who owned a gym. He's won a few shows. So everybody that was going there was a bodybuilder. And I ended up becoming friends with a guy that just completely, if I was standing next to him, his shadow would have covered me. He was a house. And we ended up being really good friends. We trained together when I wanted to lift some weights, and he was like 2-something, like a refrigerator, and he would try a human flag here and there. But I think a lot of people go through this situation as well, as you start to work out to feel better and to look better, and your nutrition probably isn't as important. But then you realize wow, I've made a lot of progress with my fitness. What happens if I start to eat better? And when I started to do that, go out to eat less, quit drinking alcohol, my body aesthetically started to change. And calisthenics, for me at least, exercise is not a thing to burn calories. But the truth is, as active as I was, and all these calisthenics moves that were using full body, I was burning a lot of calories. So my body got shredded. And my friend who I was working out with, the bodybuilder, was like, dude, you should do a bodybuilding show. And I was like, you're out of your mind. I don't even know what you're talking about. And to me, it was bodybuilding as in, the short underwear and just be on stage jacked. And he's like, nah, dude, you should do a physique show. They wear board shorts. You would crush it. And I was like, all right, I'll do it. So I left one gym and I went to another gym where I knew there was a really good bodybuilder currently. And he was my age. We had a little bit of a relationship in passing. And I walked out to him. I was like, dude, I want to do a bodybuilding show. Will you teach me how to pose? And he's like, yeah, sure. I was like, and he knows all of the shows that were coming up, but he wasn't expecting me to say what I said next, which was, I want to do the show in 2 weeks. So I actually did a couple bodybuilding shows, and that one show that was 2 weeks out, I actually got second place and third place in my division.
You must have been super shredded then.
I was crazy shredded. He didn't even adjust my nutrition. He did nothing. He taught me how to pose, which I was horrible at posing because it's wicked hard. I got a spray tan and I just went out there and dude, I don't know how familiar you are with bodybuilding, but like I didn't know how to pose my back and I couldn't get it in the 2 weeks for the life of me. So he's like, all right, here's what we're going to do. We're wasting a lot of time. You're not figuring it out. He goes, when they tell you to go into the back pose, he goes, just lift your arms up and like bicep flex overhead. He goes, and don't stop flexing until the judges tell you to stop. Then you can go into like your bad back pose. And I did. And I'll never forget. I was like, my arms were up and I was knocking elbows out. My elbows were like hitting the shoulders of the guys next to me because you're spaced enough to where the proper pose, you're not going to hit each other. But I'm like up here and I'm elbowing people. And I'll never forget. My coach is like, dude, whatever you do not tell anybody. Like after I won, he's like, don't tell these guys that you didn't train for this. Like if you tell them you didn't dehydrate and like drop your calories, he goes, they're going to jump you in the back. He goes, they're very serious about this. If they found out you just walked onto this stage and took their trophies, he goes, they're going to be pissed. And maybe that was an exaggeration of like, they're going to jump you. You know, it was kind of like a funny thing for him to say. But yeah, man, I literally walked on stage and just took 2 trophies home. So it wasn't a goal of mine, but it was a product of my training and of my discipline. And even still, I have never had to lose a bunch of weight, you know, and even since then, I haven't put on weight that I've had to lose. So I've never had a goal of fat loss. I've never like eaten in a deficit to lose body fat, but having my nutrition dialed in, it like my aesthetics and even my performance with some of my endurance training and my Spartan, it's a product of my nutrition, right? Like, yeah, I can get stronger and build muscle through fitness, but the fact that I can run a 10-mile Spartan race or go into the trails and run 8 miles around the mountains, it's a product of my nutrition being in check.
I have a lot to say on that, but one thing to clarify for people who are listening about the bodybuilding side of this is like, when people say they're going to do a bodybuilding show, usually they're like, all right, I picked a show that's 6 months away. And what they mean when they say I'm going to do a bodybuilding show is I'm going to spend the next 6 months or 4 months or whatever until that show just getting as shredded as possible. Because if you pick a show, you don't have enough time to build muscle and go through the whole thing. Like that's a several years process. Usually when you say you're going to pick a show, you're already pretty big and you're just going to get really lean. That's what you mean by like, I'm going to pick a show. So for you, Patrick, to like be like, hey, I'll do a show in 2 weeks and like be lean enough just as you are and big enough to go in and take second, like that is wildly, and I know you weren't a pro level and whatever, but still that is like insane. Like that is extremely impressive for people like listening. You need to understand how crazy that is.
I appreciate that. Yeah. I mean, and I wasn't lifting weights. It was all calisthenics, like chin-ups, push-ups, dips, weighted dips, maybe weighted pull-ups. But yeah, I wasn't hitting the weights, man. And that's what bodybuilding is. You're literally building your body like exercise by exercise, muscle by muscle, breaking down body parts. And I was just training, having fun, playing, and it worked out.
And this is the way. And now I know it's hard for even, we both coach people. So with clients, you can't just be like, hey man, just like eat all the right foods, like exercise, like adopt this playful, like that's like, it's real, but it's not necessarily tactical or like helpful kind of thing. But it is, or what I would say is like the end stage. Like that's where you want to get to. Once you overhaul your life to adopt this healthy lifestyle, it's like we've come up with all these rules. And I've seen you talk about this very recently, actually, is even like a number of steps. And someone probably asks you, Patrick, how many steps do you get in a day? And you're like, I don't really keep track. And like, well, what do you mean? Like, you're a coach, you're in shape, like you're lean, like don't you track your steps? Like, no, I live a lifestyle that makes me active. And if I counted them up, it would probably be a pretty high number, but not like sitting there watching my phone or the pedometer to see how many steps I'm getting. So it's so interesting that you kind of bypass that whole stage of trying to like figure out these things, and you just went straight into no, I'm just like going to live this healthy lifestyle, not coming from someone who has had a background of like heavy athletics, or that you were a trainer from a very young age, or always kind of in the gym as a teenager. So like, what do you think, if you can think of anything, how do you think you kind of came to that conclusion?
So it's almost not fair, because the two things that I think were the biggest factors for me was not drinking alcohol, which for me, I didn't like the taste of alcohol. I had my party days just like anybody else. You know, you go to college, and I lived in Tempe, Arizona. My friends and I, we went out drinking quite often in my 20s. But I hit a point where probably, 26 years old is when I stopped doing the record label, and I moved back home to Syracuse, New York, and I moved in with my parents. So I stopped drinking, but also, and even before that, like, I didn't necessarily go to like a university college, but I was living a college life, right? Like eating out all the time, fast food, Jack in the Box, Carl's Jr. I had a deep fryer in my house to where my friends, my roommate and I would just buy frozen chicken tenders and frozen mozzarella sticks. There was not a vegetable in sight in my early 20s. We're literally deep frying food in our apartment in our 20s. Arizona iced teas, like 99 cents. I would chug them. But then I moved home back to New York, and I wanted to open up a gym. And my mom was nice enough to say, like, I understand it's going to be really difficult for you to open up a gym and have like rent to pay and bills to pay on your own, so you can live with us. And her one stipulation was, as long as it doesn't interfere with our relationship. So as long as my mom and I maintained a good relationship, she said I could pursue my dream of owning a gym as long as I wanted and live with them. So it was easy for me to stop going out to eat, candidly, because I live with my mom and dad. Sure. So I don't want to be that coach that says, like, if you want these results, if you want to improve your nutrition, you have to stop drinking alcohol and stop going out to eat 3 days a week. Now, is that the way to do it? Yes, but it's not that cut and dry. Not everybody lives with their parents. Not everybody actually doesn't like alcohol like me. It's easier said than done, and I try to relate to that. As far as the step situation, like, I didn't even have a smartwatch until 2 years ago when I started training endurance, and I got a Garmin to actually pay attention to, you know, my training and my heart rate and things like that. But dude, I owned a 2,500 square foot gym. It was a warehouse. It was huge. And I was a personal trainer. I taught handstands. I taught acrobatics. I was moving from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. So even if, I was walking steps around my gym all day, but even if I wasn't, 6 personal training clients, I'm demonstrating exercises all day. I'm teaching an acrobatic class for an hour. I'm teaching a handstand class immediately after for an hour. My level of activity, I'm walking my dog, which does count as steps, but like just my level of activity was just outrageous. So I always had steps, you know. I taught a yoga class in between all of that. So I drive to the yoga studio, and then like with yoga, you're actually like doing the class with them and talking. And then sometimes you get up and you're fixing postures and things like that. But my activity level was just bonkers. So yeah, some of those things were like steps, but also some of them were just being active and doing some of the things that I enjoy, you know?
How do you then do that now? Because I've had this transition as well where I was, you know, fully training people in person, you know, 10 clients a day, and your steps are just like sky high. You almost can't even eat enough to just like sustain your weight. That becomes the thing with nutrition. But, you know, separate, very niche, I don't even want to say problem. It's not a problem. It's just a thing. But then, you know, primarily coaching online now, a couple clients in person, and not walking and all over your feet all over the day. So all day long. So now we're kind of in that like office worker thing. So what do you do to offset that, to maintain that active lifestyle? I'm sure your steps and activity level is not the same as it was, but how do you manage that now?
Well, I train a lot. So, you know, there's days like Sundays, I usually do my programming. I actually, for most of my clients, I do weekly programs. A lot of them I do 4 to 6 weeks, but I do have a handful of people, if not more, that I write weekly programs. If they're training for a race, whether it's a Spartan race or a 10K or a half marathon, I use Training Peaks, and I basically look over all their data from the previous week. And then I'll sit down on Sunday and I'll write their next week's workout. So Sundays are usually like very inactive for me. But to answer your question, I train 6 days a week, sometimes 7. And my workouts are 2 to 3 hours long. So I walk my dogs in the morning. I'll go through some check-ins. I'll go through the data on some of my clients, and then I'll do a 90-minute strength training session, and then I'll do a 30-minute Airdyne workout a couple times a week. And then like a Saturday, I'm running 8 miles in the woods. So certain days, like a strength training day, like a 90-minute strength training session followed by 30 minutes on the Airdyne, I might get like 4,000 or 5,000 steps that day. But
in addition
the level,
to the workout,
but like that's still a very active day. Just because like I'm walking around my small garage during my workout, I'm not getting steps. That 30-minute Airdyne, I'm like burning probably a good amount of calories, but there's no steps getting counted.
Right.
But that's still 2 to 3 hours of physical activity. I should also mention, like, you don't burn nearly as many calories as you think you do during a strength training session, but nonetheless, I'm active for 90 minutes, right? So yeah, it just adds up, man. And also I don't sit still. I'm up, I'm down. It's been a minute, but like, my fiance and I used to do partner acrobatics. So even 30 to 60 minutes of doing acrobatics with another human, lifting them over your head. And I don't know if you've seen any of the videos I posted, but like flipping them around on your feet and all this, like there's a lot of activity going on there. So that's how I do it, and it helps too when you run 8 miles in the woods on a Tuesday and then a Saturday. Like I don't exercise to burn calories, but the truth is my exercise keeps me pretty active and it keeps me burning calories. Like with this hybrid training that I'm doing, I can't eat enough. I am in that point. Like I can't not eat enough.
Yeah. No, I understand that totally, man. Like I think we've gone too far with the whole idea of you can't out exercise your diet. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily true, but like more exercise is definitely beneficial to burning more calories. The purpose of your exercise and your workouts shouldn't be burning calories. It's like, a few rings down the ladder of the benefits that you're getting from it, but it is a thing that you're doing. And if you can train more and you can work out more, you do get to eat more. And I actually did the math on this once, and I don't remember it exactly, but like a regular pace, just kind of like leisurely, 30-minute walk for like an average weight person burns like about 50 calories, something like that, which doesn't seem like much. But you add that up over the week, and like that could be enough, just that alone, to like not necessarily lose weight, but not gain weight if you're not eating like a crazy unhealthy diet. So there's definitely a lot of merit to like, hey, if you want to eat more and lose weight, like you actually can train more, and it won't offset. It doesn't mean you get to eat again like an unsupervised teenager. You still got to eat healthy, but you can do a lot of damage positively.
I completely agree. Yeah, for sure. I completely agree. I know it's just so hard because we try to get the right message across, but you're right. We've gone very far into the you can't outrun your fork. And it's just tough because there's some truth to that. You know what I mean? That's why some like recreational runners, like they go out and they run 7 or 8 miles on a Sunday. And yeah, you get a lot of steps in, you probably burned a lot of calories, but then you're so exhausted that you just veg out on the couch for the rest of the day. So your activity level plummets after 10 o'clock in the morning, and you just feel like you can eat whatever you want. So a pint of Ben & Jerry's is 1,000 calories right there, and then you get pizza. And so there, it's just a fine line, but I completely agree. We've gone very much in the direction of you can't outrun your fork, but you do burn calories when you're exercising, and we want to get the right message across because we don't want people to have a bad relationship with exercise.
Of course.
But the truth is, like, I train 6 days a week for 2 hours a day. I can eat. Yeah. You know what I mean? I can put down some calories.
The other thing that I think about this, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on it, is I think that starting with the exercise piece, to me, it feels like a positive thing. You're going out and you're doing something to improve your health versus taking away food, restricting calories and whatever, of course, is necessary and part of it and all that stuff. But if you've got to pick one to start at, it's going to depend a little bit on the psychology of the person. But I'm more in favor of let's go with the positive thing. Let's see what we can add positively to your life rather than take away stuff. And then maybe, like exactly in your scenario, your story was like, hey, I'm trying to exercise, I'm trying to chase these goals. And once you kind of get into the workouts, you're like, oh, well, how can I change my nutrition to make my workouts better? Maybe if I did lose a little bit of body fat, it would be easier to do some pull-ups or a human flag, or I could run further, or, if I was able to eat a little bit more protein, I could build a little bit more muscle, I could deadlift more weight, whatever the thing that you're chasing is. But you can always add that exercise, and then kind of once you get that healthy lifestyle thing down a little bit, then you can start to add or rather take away food and make those changes, because I think it's way harder. I think it's a lot easier for people to add exercise in than it is to change food. And I think it's just because we eat multiple times a day, and so you've got multiple opportunities or circumstances to make the right decision, and that becomes a little harder.
For sure. I agree 100%. And I think there's so much to be said about that. First of all, exercise and fitness can be fun. So if you can find an activity that you enjoy and even like has a community involved in it, like adding that into your life is definitely going to be a positive. You can also like get a new identity once you start to feel better and get stronger, and you find a sport or a type of athleticism that you enjoy. You can like identify with that. And then to your point, you're like, well, would I be faster if I dropped a couple pounds? And we all know deep down that does come through with the nutrition. Whether, and you've heard this, whether it's not, it's someone who being like, oh, I wish I had a trainer that could follow me around and knock that cookie out of my hand. I think the other tough part is fitness. Any type of fitness works. I think any good coach can admit that. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, I don't care if it's Zumba. I don't care if it's yoga. I don't care if it's calisthenics, weightlifting. Like, the truth is the science, which is such a big thing, like, especially on threads. Where's the peer reviewed study? What's the science say? Like, the science is across the board. Exercise works. Are there some flaws in certain things? Like with yoga, it's exercise. You can get strong. You can get more flexible. The biggest downfall is there's no pulling in yoga. You don't get any back work in yoga. You do chaturangas, you do planks, so there's a lot of strength in the front of the body, but the back of the body, there's no rows, right? Mm-hmm. Whatever type of row it is. But the truth is, all exercise works. There's a lot more nuance when it comes to nutrition. Like, what's the best diet? What's the right types of food? What is the deal with the ingredients? How much should I be eating? How much protein should I be eating? As opposed to like, just go for a walk. Go take a Zumba class. Go take a yoga class. I say this reluctantly. Go take a CrossFit class. Like, I'm not a big CrossFit fan, but like the truth is, people that take CrossFit classes for 3 to 5 days a week, like they make crazy body changes, crazy body composition changes. They lose weight and then they're like, oh, what if I lose some weight through nutrition? Would I be able to do more butterfly pull-ups? Would I be able to do more handstand push-ups? Yeah, probably.
The thing that makes all the exercise works is like all of it works to improve your health and all of it burns calories. Now, certain exercise forms will have like, pros and cons, like you're mentioning. Yoga, not a lot of like back pulling stuff. But could you supplement that with 1 day of strength training where you literally only go to the gym and train back? Absolutely, you could do that.
For sure.
Right? And the thing with nutrition is you've got to tie it all in together.
Yes.
There's more factors and there's more ways to get at it. There's also more emotion and like tradition and culture and things involved that make it so much more difficult. And it's easy for people like us to sit here and be like, we just never really like struggled with nutrition, right? And we had, times of not being perfect and whatever, but I've never gained 75 pounds
for sure
by accident and had to lose that. So I don't know what that's like. I can appreciate what that's like. And, I'm sure you have as well, take people through it and, all that stuff. But it's way harder to tie in all the pieces of nutrition. But by the same thread of like everything works, kind of all the diets work as long as you're in a calorie deficit. If you find a way to make yourself eat little enough, you will lose weight. Now, there's a lot of ways to do that, and a lot of them are dumb, but like essentially that's what's happening.
For sure. And a lot of diets, all diets work if you're in a calorie deficit as far as fat loss goes, but also all diets work as far as improving your health if you eat vegetables and, control junk food, and all diets work to help you build strength and muscle as long as you're eating enough protein.
Right.
So it's multifaceted. And, to your point of like the yoga, could you supplement it with like a back day at the gym? Of course. And just to go full circle on the steps, I would rather somebody strength train 3 days a week and like the other day only get 5,000 steps or 4,000 steps, but take a 60-minute yoga class. Like, that's what I mean when I'm saying that, like, I care more about a level of activity than just a mundane step number.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because the truth is, yes, walking burns calories, but you're actually, if it's about calories, you're probably going to burn more calories in a yoga class in 60 minutes than you are on taking an extra 2,000 steps. Or Absolutely. Even doing 45 minutes of mobility, which I don't think a lot of people really work hard enough in their mobility training to get true results. But the truth is, if you do some hip 90-90 rotations and some cat-cows and some down dog to up dog and things like that for 30 minutes, you're going to burn more calories than you would walking for 30 minutes, getting 1,500 extra steps.
Right.
So
the steps is just a proxy for activity because it's an easy way to calculate things.
For
right?
Sure.
Like, even slightly related, but a little bit aside, is like counting the number of reps that you're doing in the gym. Of course, it's a useful thing, but your body doesn't know how many reps you've done. Like, your bicep doesn't know. They're like, oh, okay, we did 8 reps, so that means I'm going to grow now. Like, it doesn't work that way. It's just a proxy so that we can make sense of it in the English language or whatever language you speak in our brains to be like, okay, this is how many I did and this is how I can track it and progress it over time. But like, again, if you biked for an hour and a half, you cycled, like, and you had 0 steps in the day, it doesn't mean you weren't active during the day.
Exactly.
Right? It's just a proxy for activity.
Agreed. Completely agreed. And I think that's what's lost on people when they're like, oh, studies show that people that have taken 10,000 steps a day live longer. Well, no, most people that take 10,000 steps a day are just more active people in general. It's the same thing as the study that people with better grip strength have lived longer. Like, no, people who have stronger grip tend to be people who are in the gym. Like, that's where it comes from. And, to your point, I don't know if this is taken in a different direction, but as far as the reps and your body not knowing how many reps, that's why I think that the amount of reps isn't nearly as important as the level of intensity of those reps. So people could argue that, like, oh, the best rep scheme for hypertrophy is 8 to 12 reps or 5 to 10 reps, whatever you want to make the argument. But if you're doing, even if you have the perfect number of reps for hypertrophy, if you're leaving 15 reps in reserve, if you're doing 8 reps and you're leaving 15 reps in reserve, it doesn't matter that the best rep scheme is 8 to 12 reps because the level of intensity isn't there. Your body isn't just like, oh, they did 8 reps. That's the perfect amount for hypertrophy. Let's grow. You have to have that intensity to match.
Right. It's like a misinterpretation of what that thing means. Like 8 to 12 reps, maximally 8 to 12 reps at a very high intensity is a quote unquote maybe perfect sweet spot for hypertrophy because it's sufficient volume at a high intensity, but not more volume than is necessary that is making you more fatigued, right? So it's like, 3 reps, probably not great for hypertrophy, just not getting enough volume, but 50 reps, also just way too much volume, higher chance for injury, tougher to recover from, all that stuff. And so the answer, falls somewhere in between that and that 8 to 12, 8 to 15, 8 to up to 30-ish, whatever. Different studies, different people, all the same thing. But the point is that it's got to be intense. And that's the thing that is missing. But that's hard to to teach. Since all this like intensity stuff has started becoming a little bit more mainstream, have you started to pay attention to your own training intensity or with clients and tracking it in any way to teach yourself or to teach other people better? Because it is a skill to learn how to train hard.
As far as myself goes, whatever I do, man, I have one speed. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying like I'm not the best weightlifter, I'm not the best runner, but I just know how to push myself. Mm-hmm. And I think there's something to be said. And that's where a lot of times a coach comes into play, because it's hard to know how to push yourself. And even to an extent, it's hard for the general population to use, like, RPE isn't always the best way to gauge, because a lot of people don't know. And even me, sometimes I'm like, what was that from a 1 to 10 RPE? Like, what was that? And that's why for me, when I program for my clients, I do prescribe reps. Sometimes I prescribe the weight if, client dependent. But what I usually like to say is like 1 to 2 reps in reserve. Even if it takes you even if the first set you're like, shoot, maybe I had 5 in reserve, then to up the weight a little bit. But when you go as far as saying like 3 to 4 reps in reserve, that's a little too much. Like, they're probably not lifting high enough. So I like to stick, like, even if I say like 1 rep in reserve and they end up with 2 reps in reserve, that's better than saying like leave 3 to 5 reps in reserve because they end up leaving 10. Yeah. For myself, it's all about keeping the intensity high for me. And for my deadlifts, for example, I start out with a lower weight with higher reps. And actually, I usually go in and my first set is 135 times 5. And then I'll work my way up. I'll do 185 times 5. And then I usually go up until like 350. And I'll do like 205 times 2, 225 times 2, 285 times 2. And then I'll do like a 1 rep max. As long as my intensity stays high and the bar speed doesn't slow down, I'm still getting stronger. Arguably with the science, yes, 1 rep is power. But if I'm not slowing down my bar speed, then I'm still gaining strength. I'm still getting stronger. And it's just something after 10 years, man, you learn, you just have a better feel for certain things. Like, even with calisthenics, I didn't touch a weight for well over 10 years. And I was still able to make push-ups challenging. And a lot of people, they can do 20 push-ups. I heard this a lot with people during COVID, like, oh, I did 100 push-ups a day. Like, the classic thing is just keep doing more push-ups. Are you getting stronger relatively to what you were before? Yes. But you're not, like, you're just getting better at push-ups. I hate to say it. You're kind of just getting better at push-ups. You're not really getting stronger shoulders from that. You're not getting a stronger chest. So if you can do 50 push-ups in a row, you need to elevate your feet on a box. You need to slow them down. Even dips, you need to start doing dips or handstand push-ups or pike push-ups. It's just about knowing how to manipulate your body to increase the leverage or increase the amount of body weight that you're moving. Because with calisthenics, it's not as easy to know how to do that as it is at a gym with a machine where you're pulling a pin on a weight and lowering it to a heavier weight, or you're adding weight on the end of a bar. So I've just really learned how to increase the difficulty and create more of a stimulus on my body through calisthenics. And I've just always wanted to push myself. And again, just because you're dripping in sweat and you can't move after a workout doesn't mean it's a good workout, but you should be keeping the level of intensity up enough to be challenging yourself. Especially for me, I do consider myself an athlete, so I'm not necessarily just somebody that's like in the general public and I just want to work out for the sake of being in better shape. I have goals of, cracking top 10 in Spartan races. And I did that this year. I was, the past 3 or 4 years, I was in 25th place in my age group. And this year I cracked top 10 twice. And it's because I'm training at a level of intensity that put me a tier above myself when I was just training for the sake of being healthier, gaining some strength, and improving my life in some way, shape, or form.
Right. And congratulations on that. And I hear the hesitation in your voice a little bit about like saying what you do versus what, general population does. I struggle with this as well, because it's like, hey, this is our job. Like we really like doing this. I don't want to speak exactly for you, Patrick, but like going to the gym and like pushing yourself, and like that's not a hard part of your day. Like you don't dread that very often. I'm sure there's days where you do, but like 9 times out of 10, it's probably one of the better parts of your day. Like we like doing this, and you want to train hard, and you want to train for different purposes than just like feeling better, losing a few pounds, and whatever. So you gotta, people listening, to take all that with a grain of salt, because like, you don't have to do all those things and train till your eyes are bugging out, and but if you do want to change, like something's got to change, and you probably do have to train a little bit harder. One thing I did want to just go back to really quick was with the progressions in calisthenics. Things you said, changing angles, changing leverages, slowing things down, maybe doing it with one hand or one side or what have you, rather than just doing increasing reps. The other side of this, and I think where people get a lot mixed up with calisthenics or just body weight exercise in general, is that it doesn't necessarily mean it's easier. So sure, we've got the progressions, but what about the regressions of like, hey, I can't even do one push-up or one dip or one, insert your exercise here. So where do you suggest that people start off if they're like, hey, I want to start exercising, I'm interested in the whole calisthenics thing, but like I can't really do any of the stuff. Where do you suggest people start?
Really good point. And that's one thing that I realized the more I coached and the more people that I like worked with in person, the more people I taught in a yoga class, I realized like that's the problem. Like people just say like, oh, I can't do a push-up, so I can't do calisthenics. I don't know what else to do. I can't do a dip, so I'm just never going to try dips, right? The thing to understand is calisthenics is a lot more about leveraging your own body weight. And that could mean like increasing the amount of body weight that you're moving or decreasing the amount of body weight that you're moving. And to answer your question, for example, a push-up. When you do a push-up, a full regular push-up, let's say you're pushing 60% of your body weight. When you drop to your knees, you will instantly feel less weight in your hands. Even, let's just say a plank. You use the example of a plank. If you're in a straight arm plank, you're going to feel about 60% of your body weight in your hands. If you drop to your knees, you're going to feel less weight in your hands. Similarly, if you put your feet on a 6-inch box, you're going to feel more weight in your hands. So it's all about finding the amount of body weight that you can push. So I wrote a blog on how to do a push-up, and I did a test where I took my body scale and I did a plank on my scale, and then I went down to my knees with my hands on my scale, and then I put my feet on my ottoman, and I looked at the amount of weight. Obviously, I weighed myself right before, and then I looked at the percentages of how much of my weight was in my hands or registering on the scale in each position.
Very cool.
So push-ups is one thing, but then like dips, for example. A body weight dip is a very difficult thing, right? And if you break things down to push and pull, right? And you put it into levels. Level 1 push could be a push-up, for example. And within level 1, there's multi-levels, right? So let's say, level 1A would be a modified push-up. Then you could even make like level 1B be like a hands elevated push-up. And then level 1C would be a regular push-up. As you lower yourself down from a less of an elevated position, the more weight you put in your hands, the harder it's getting, right? And then you could go into feet elevated push-ups, handstand push-up. Actually, I would leave handstand push-up out of that. Sorry. So if you can't push 60% of your body weight with your hands in front of you, like a regular push-up, there's a good chance that you can't push 100% of your body weight with your hands by your side pushing down in a dip, right? Does that mean that there's no possible way for you to train dips? No. What you do is, I think what a lot of people would go to is the bench dip, which I hate the bench dip. I think it's a horrible exercise. It puts too much stress on your shoulders. It doesn't actually replicate a dip because it puts your shoulders in extension when your arms are behind you, as opposed to a regular dip, your hands are by your side.
Yep.
So what I like to have people do is, again, with a calisthenics background, I have parallettes. For those of you that don't know what parallettes are, it's basically just like mimicking dip bars, but they're on the ground. They're like just under your knees. But if you were at a gym, what I would suggest people do is you take 2 benches and you put them a little wider than your hips. You put your hands on each bench, and then you have your legs in front of you with your knees bent, and you do a dip. When that gets too easy, you straighten your legs. So now your heels are on the floor and your legs are straight, and you do a dip. When that gets easy, you elevate your feet on a box in the same position. So now you're in between the 2 benches. Your hands are on the bench and your feet are on the box to where you're forming an L with your body. And now that your feet are elevated around hip level, now you're going to feel more weight in your hands. So you're pushing more body weight than you would be when your feet are flat and your knees are bent, but you're not pushing as much body weight as if you were hanging from a dip bar, pushing 100% of your body weight. So I would say you find a variation of dip that is challenging for you to do 8 to 10 reps, leaving 1 to 2 reps in reserve. And then when that gets easy, you move on to the next level. And yes, there's ways like in between that. Could you be training band assisted dips? Of course, right? Now the same thing is said for a pull-up. If you can't, an inverted row is my go-to, right? If you can't do an inverted row, which is the exact opposite of a push-up, right? If you are in a push-up position, you flip yourself upside down and you grab onto some rings, it's the exact opposite position. It's a pull. So an inverted row, you're technically pulling 60% of your body weight with your hands in front of you. If you can't pull 60% of your body weight with your hands in front of you, then you're not going to be able to pull 100% of your body weight with your hands above you to a bar. So you train the inverted row. There's different variations of the inverted row. You have your knees bent and your feet flat. That's a little bit less body weight that you're pulling. When that gets easier, you straighten your legs so your heels are on the ground. When that gets easier, you elevate your feet on a box. Now your feet are in line with your hips. When that gets easier, you can start to maybe try some pull-up negatives. And actually, you should be incorporating negatives and isometric holds and even maybe some band-assisted pull-ups. But that's how I would say, like, oh, I can't do a pull-up, I'll never do pull-ups. No, you can train pulling exercises and start to train your body to be able to pull more and more of your body weight. And that's what I highly suggest. But I see a lot of people who want to do a pull-up and they just do band-assisted pull-ups. That's all they do. The issue with the band-assisted pull-up is when you go from the top to the bottom, it just bumps you right, like it springs you right back up. The hardest part of a pull-up for most people is the bottom to the top. So if you're just bouncing, you're never going to get any better. But if you utilize the band-assisted pull-up while you're teaching yourself how to pull in an inverted row, there is some carryover there. So as long as you don't just get stuck on doing band-assisted pull-ups, like you can build pull-up strength using inverted rows, isometrics, negatives, and things like that. So to me, the inverted row is the best way to train to do a pull-up. If you can't do a pull-up, you're not out of luck. And if you can't pull yourself from a dead hang on an inverted row, you're not going to be able to pull yourself on a dead hang from a pull-up bar. But if you get strong pulling yourself on an inverted row, that will translate to a little bit, more of a dead hang pull-up.
Thank you for that very detailed description. I mean, that's going to be super helpful. Like if you have been struggling with these things, hit the rewind button and listen to that little section as many times as you need to, because that's super helpful.
Yeah,
like,
sorry if it was too much.
No. It was perfect, Patrick. I mean, a lot of these things, it sounds very simple when we say it like this, like, oh my God, why didn't I think of that? But like, don't be hard on yourself for not having thought of that, right? Again, this is our job. This is what we do. We think about this all the time. How can I make less of my body weight, more leverage here? But this is what we do. So it is very simplistic, but it's not. It's okay if you didn't figure that out. But there are ways to go about doing it. One thing on the pull-up thing that I think ties a lot of stuff in reference to what we were talking about with doing push-ups endlessly, is that I think the band-assisted pull-up is really great for practicing the skill and like learning that motor pattern of doing a pull-up. But I agree with you completely that it's not really going to be the thing that's going to get you stronger. Like your strength development is independent of the skill development of doing the pull-up. And I feel like that band assist is like, okay, this is what it's supposed to feel like. I go from here to here, and that's through that same range of motion. And like, all right, I got that. But you're never going to get stronger. Like I don't know about you, I've never seen anyone that I can think of go from like just doing band assisted pull-ups and then just be able to do a pull-up. It doesn't really happen. But that skill development piece is underrated, I think, and very important. And this is not just for calisthenics. It goes for all exercises. You teach someone how to do a bench press the right way, even if they're decently strong, they can go up 30, 40, 50 pounds just by tightening up their technique a little bit. Yeah, skill development is a real thing. Agreed.
And, not just the band assisted pull up, and not to hate on this machine, but the machine assisted pull up. Mm-hmm. Like I've never seen anybody that just does the machine assisted pull up go from no pull ups to pull ups, because they usually don't use it correctly. They're doing 20 reps and they're not doing any other type of pull up training. Like, yeah, maybe they do some lat pull downs and things like that, but like, I just don't think the carryover is there because they're not utilizing the other aspects of their overhead pull. And they're just like, let's just do more reps on the assisted pull-up machine.
Right. I'd say also like the pull-up assisted machine is better than the bands, only because at least the resistance, or the assistance rather, is like constant and it's not varied through the thing. But I mean, that's getting a little bit more technical. But yes, train the actual movement and then do your strength development elsewhere. Now, unless there's anything else that you had to say on that, I did want to talk to you quickly about how you program, even just for yourself, again, your hybrid training, right? So you're running, you're training for races, but you're also strength training. How do you mix this through the week? And now you're training on a 6-day week and training pretty intensely, and so we can try and like shrink that down. But how do you mix your cardio training, be it your zone 2 training, your zone 5 training, your the different types of cardio training with your strength training?
So it's all about managing stressors, right? So you don't want to be overstressing the same body part too many days in a row or without enough rest. So for me, I usually do an upper body day and then 2 full body days. So Monday I do upper body, Wednesday and Friday I do a full body. I usually do one like longer trail run a week. And in between, I'm doing speed work. And I think that's the one thing that I've learned the most over the past year and a half since I've really been diving into hybrid training is the speed work and how important it is. Because you can become a better runner by just like continuing to run longer, but you're not really going to get faster. So like surge work, fartleks and things like that have actually made me a faster runner. And then when it comes to race time, I can actually implement that speed when I need to. So, for me, I don't do much zone 2 work, like specific, maybe on Mondays after my upper body workout, I'll do like an easy ride on the Airdyne for like 30 minutes. But for me, it's really about intensity. And I don't mean just like snapping the entire time. But when push comes to shove, if I'm doing a Spartan race, these Spartan races are really tough. I have to be able to maintain a level of intensity through these races. So if I don't know how to handle the intensity during training, then when I get to that moment in a race, then my mentality is just going to be shot because I'm going to crack. So I have to be able to experience what I would experience in a race during my training. But for the most part, it's just, making sure that my legs get a pretty decent break, like for sure 1 day off the legs, if not 2. And that's kind of the thing is like, if you're starting to do a decent amount of endurance training, even though I train 6 days a week, one of those days, so my 7th day is completely off, so I don't really do much. But the one of the other days, like a 30-minute Airdyne ride is a very low intensity or even almost like non-impact. Mm-hmm. If I wanted to swim, that would be 0 impact altogether. But I make sure that I'm not doing like high impact things all the time. And another thing that has been a huge game changer for me is the amount of agility work and plyometric work that I do to make sure that I can handle that level of intensity. So I didn't just like hit the ground running with the type of schedule that I just told you. 2 years ago, I started doing plyometrics, whether it be bounding or depth jumps, a lot of triple extension work, a lot of balance work to make sure that my joints and my tendons can maintain not just the level of intensity, but the level of impact. Running an 8-mile trail run in the woods in upstate New York, there's a lot of downhill running. That there's a lot going on with my quads and my knees to where if I don't properly condition them, then I'm going to run into issues. So a lot of this was, how do I want to say this? Like, not necessarily a prerequisite, but I was hoping that I was going to be better than I was like 6 months into doing hybrid training. And like, I didn't do great in my like A races, like within like 6 months in, 7 months in. And I was like, damn, maybe this is a mistake. But I was just like setting the foundation of what was to come. And I had high expectations because I've been training for over 10 years. Like now that I implement this awesome program, I should be really, really good. But it was new to me. So I had to set those foundations, and it took a while. Like, you don't get the benefits of plyometrics until 6 months to a year later. I just made a video on this yesterday. Like, even as much as you don't get the benefits of like strength or muscle growth, like the day after a workout, that's the thing. I say this a lot. Like, you go to the gym today to get the benefits of feeling better and having more confidence. The muscle growth and the strength comes like 2 or 3 months down the road. Like, you're not reaping those benefits immediately. But plyometrics, it takes even longer, and that's what's tough. You don't want to do it because you're like, well, I don't get anything out of this like anytime soon. Why would I do this? But you got to put that work in on like the things that aren't sexy or the things that aren't flashy, because that's what's really going to make the difference down the road. So when it comes to training for my clients, I just manage everybody's stressors throughout the week and throughout the month. And that's why everybody's different. Like I have a lot of clients who I just want to work out. I just want to feel better. I just want to get stronger. I want to fit into my clothes better, whatever the case is. But if I have a client that is running a half marathon, is running a Spartan race, I have to manage those stressors on a weekly basis, as opposed to just programming 4 weeks out like I would for the general population who just wants to feel better, but managing the stressors and making sure that I'm able to fit these higher intensity runs in and a lower body max, strength day. I got to make sure that I can manage each of them individually, because some people can handle more volume, more intensity, and other people can't. So I know that's like a long-winded way of saying that like it really depends because everybody's different. But the main takeaway is it's just about managing stressors. And it's also tough because everybody has different goals, right? If you're listening and you haven't heard of hybrid training, I would be surprised, because it's kind of like the new functional movement. And then you got a lot of people who are like, oh, hybrid training is just exercising. Like, to an extent, because when people think hybrid training, it's endurance training and strength training. But just because you strength train and do endurance training doesn't mean that you're hybrid training, right? Like hybrid training is having concurrent training goals with unrelated objectives. So for example, rugby players, they need to be strong as hell, and they also need to be fast and have some good endurance. And they're going to be training differently for each of those. So it's a little surprising, but like rugby players are there's a lot of rugby players who do actual hybrid training. So yeah, it just really depends. If I have somebody who wants to run a half marathon, but they also want to be able to do 10 pull-ups, I'm going to train them differently than somebody who wants to, run a Spartan race and be able to deadlift 300 pounds. So it just depends.
I mean, it's so important to highlight just that it does come down to stress management. Like, it can't just be train as much as possible. And again, most people like have a job, have a family, have other things going on. Like, your job is not to be a professional athlete, and certainly not I don't think there's any like professional hybrid athletes. It hasn't even caught on enough to have like a sport of CrossFit type thing yet, although I think it's very much headed that way.
Yeah, High Rocks is probably as close as it gets. Yeah,
and with some recent extremely unfortunate events in CrossFit, I think High Rocks is going to take that over very quickly.
You're probably right. Yeah.
But anyways, it's a completely separate point. It's understanding like, what can I tolerate, and what do I actually want to do? What do I need to do to get those goals? And then what can I tolerate, and how can I fit this into the rest of my life? Because maybe there is like a 6-day training cycle that, one should go through, but they can't actually train 6 days a week. So sure, it might not be a horrible idea to be like, all right, I've got these 6 training days and I just got to get them in order. And if it takes me a week and a half or 2 weeks to get through 6 training days, then that's okay, because you're still covering your bases, right? And yes, the trade-off to that is you're going to have slower progress, slower gains, slower skill development, and all those things. But like, it's fine, because you're not a professional athlete, and you're not putting food on your table by winning Spartan races or
for sure,
having a faster 10K time. Like, that's not what you're doing. So it's okay to kind of split your training up like that, but you got to be able to recover from it, which is difficult to figure out, but important.
Yeah, and for me, I sleep well, and I sleep a lot. You know what I mean? Like, and that's the other thing too. I have clients that are doctors. I have clients that are new parents. I have clients that work a lot, regardless of if they're a doctor or not. I'm very privileged, and I'm very fortunate that I sleep at least 8 hours a night. And there's times where I've slept 10 hours a night. You know what I mean? But like, to me, that's the most important part of recovery is sleep. And then nutrition, again, just like full circle. Listen, don't get me wrong, I like to enjoy a sweet treat every once in a while. Well, actually, every night. But, we go out to eat. We went to San Diego a couple weeks ago, and I ate what I wanted. But if I was just eating like full on junk food, I wouldn't be able to recover. I wouldn't be able to perform. It just wouldn't happen. So my nutrition and my sleep are top priority. And I also have to admit too, like 6 days a week of training is not easy. Like, I'm not even talking physically. I'm talking like time wise. It is crazy, dude. Especially if I train for 2 to 3 hours a day. Fortunately, again, I work for myself. I can work late at night if I need to, but I have a garage gym. So some of these longer, I cut out, like, a lot of people have a 20-minute drive to the gym. 20 minutes one way, 20 minutes the other. That's 40 minutes that I'm using to go to do my workout. Mm-hmm. But like my trail runs I do are 35 to 45 minutes away. So I got to drive 45 minutes to run 8 miles. That's a long day. Like, I have to seriously plan that, and it's easier. That's where I usually do my weekends. As an online coach, I do give myself weekends off, and I'm not saying that I never touch work on a weekend, but the work-life balance has to be there. So the expectation that I set with my clients is like, listen, you have me basically 24/7 Monday through Friday, but on Saturdays and Sundays, I don't work unless I have some downtime,
Mhm.
You know, like if you ask me a question, I'll be there. But the truth is, even if somebody does train on a Saturday, like one of my clients, there's no fitness emergencies on a Saturday or Sunday. You know what I mean?
There are no fitness emergencies. If it's an emergency, like call 911. You know?
Yeah, you know, for sure. And I feel like if you're a good coach, and I don't mean this as in like I'm not like calling out bad coaches, but like your clients should have a little bit of independence and should be able to make a decision on their own. You know, and I work with such good people, and all of my clients are awesome to where like they're really not going to like message me and be like, oh, should I do a fourth set? Like, you know, I did 10 and I felt stronger. Could I do 12 reps next time? Like, they know my style. We've gone over these questions before. They have independence to like, if you're feeling good and I've programmed 3 sets and you want to do a fourth set. Like, I want you to have that independence, and I want you to feel your body out and do what you think is best. But like, no one's texting me on a Saturday and being like, I need to know, I'm about to do my workout. Can I do 12 reps? Like, you're right. There are never any fitness emergencies. Even, you know, I say maybe there's more of like an urgency to talk about like nutrition at times. Like, I'm going to a party. I'm really nervous because I know there's going to be junk food there, and I know it's all going to be calorie dense foods. There's going to be no color on the plates. There's no vegetables. It's all macaroni salads, pasta salads. I'm freaking out. Like, if I see that message on a Saturday, I'm not going to be like, it's my day off. Like, I'm not, good luck. You know, truthfully, I have a system in place to where I ask somebody, is there anything coming up in the next week that we have to be prepared for? But like, if I'm on a mountain in the Adirondacks hiking, or if I'm on a run and I don't have service, I'm not going to be able to answer that question. But if it's a day where I'm like, oh, I'm chilling on the couch, you know, watching House Hunters, and I see a message come in, like, I'll be glad to answer it. I'll be glad to jump on the phone with you if I have to.
Of course.
But having that work-life balance is important for me, just like I hope that the people that I'm working with aren't working 7 days a week themselves. You know?
Yeah, no, well said. I do the same thing. I mean, sometimes not answering the message is actually on purpose, part of the coaching. Because it's like, hey, you just figure this out for yourself, and I'll answer it like in 2 hours, where it's like, you know, the workout is done, and then we can talk about in our next check-in or whatever, well, why does that matter or not matter, or what happened with that, right? But then again, to your point, there's definitely been plenty of times where I know that a client is traveling and we're in a specific stage of training, and it's like, hey, okay, we're going for dinner at 6:30 p.m. I'm going to text you a picture of the menu. You let me know what thing I should order or whatever. But those are like, we talked about it ahead of time. It's not coming out of the blue and like, oh, well, like, just pick something. It doesn't matter that much. Like, for whatever reason, for that client, it does matter at that time, and it's like pre-talked about. But totally agreed that like part of the coaching is like delivering independence eventually. I don't want you to need me all of the time for every little thing. If that's the case over a long period of time, then like, I feel like I haven't done my job as a coach.
For sure. And just like anything else, you know, people could get as deep into this as you want, but like, when you're helping somebody go through something, you don't want to enable them. You know what I mean? Like, that's where a lot of problems come into play, is like families just like enable people, like, and that's how they don't improve. And I'm no psychologist or anything like that, but there's something to be said about like enabling somebody. Like, every time they message me, this like little insecurity that they have with something, like, I'm not going to enable you. I'm going to help you, and we're going to make progress together. But like, I don't want to enable people by just like, every time I see my phone ring or go off, like, boom, 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 answer your question. Like, if it's something that we talked about, like you said, like, oh, okay, we can work through this together. But like, you got to figure some stuff out on your own sometimes.
Yeah. Agreed, man. Well, Patrick, this has been phenomenal. Do you think that there's anything else that you specifically wanted to talk about or get off your chest here?
Nah, this was actually cool. I could just keep chatting with you for forever. I mean, this was really good. I think we talked about, like, a lot of the subjects we talked about we covered them pretty well. If there was anything else anybody like wanted us to chat about, they can obviously, I mean, you can say this, it's your podcast, but like, you know, leave questions in the comments, and maybe another time we can jump on and do this again. But I just don't want to beat the drum too hard with the topics we already talked about. Just stay healthy, stay moving, you know, like, be kind to yourself and work hard. That's what I have to say.
Beautiful. I love that message. It's almost like I would have said it myself. If people do have questions, so Patrick, where's the best place for them to get in touch with you?
Well, probably Instagram, getting in touch with me would probably be my email, patrick@syracusefitnesscenter.com. But as far as seeing what I have to say and getting some more of my content, Instagram would be at DiBello Fitness. It's hard to respond to messages on there. I know you probably experience the same thing. And honestly, my message notifications are off on Instagram because it's a lot. You know what I mean? And I want to have all my clients communicate with me via email. So I just don't need another app like popping up, message. So all of the communication actually I do it on WhatsApp these days. So if you want to get a hold of me, email it is patrick@syracusefitnesscenter.com. But if you just want to try picking up what I'm putting down, at Patrick DiBello Fitness on Instagram.
Yeah, agreed with that. And if you have very specific questions to ask Patrick, then send him an email. But be a normal person. Have little things. Follow him on Instagram. Comment on videos and ask things. Patrick's very active, so he'll get back to you. And again,
and same thing to you. You know what I mean? I want to encourage people share his content, share Daniel's content, comment on his videos, create, interact. You know what I mean? We're here for that. It helps us help you. You know what I mean? We can be better coaches when we have that interaction and you pick our brains, and it gives us ideas on what type of content to make and how to approach the next piece of content that we do want to make. So I think that interaction from our followers is super important. Not even if you're not a client, that's okay. We can still help you, and we still want to help you. So, don't be afraid to comment on any of your friends' content. And if you have friends that are business owners, comment, share, do whatever you can to help them out and to interact with them. Sorry if that was a little off subject rant, but
no. Perfectly on subject. I appreciate that. I agree with that very much so. It definitely helps. It helps us help you, helps grow the shows and the good content, and getting more good information out there is kind of what this is all about. So
for sure,
don't ever hesitate to ask questions. But Patrick, thank you so much for being here again. I appreciate your time and your wisdom very much. I would love to do this again sometime, and this was fun.
Sure.
Podcast times, it always flies by. This is episode 180 something, and we hit record, I look at the time, and then it's oh my God, we got to start wrapping this up already. But really, thank you so much for being here, man.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks everybody for listening. Patrick DiBello. Give him a follow on everything. I'll put all the links in the show notes. Make sure you share the podcast, subscribe, leave a rating on iTunes, Spotify, all the places. That's that. Go outside, be a good person. See you next time.